Picture this for a moment. You're living in medieval Europe, you've met someone you're attracted to, and you want to express your romantic feelings. But before you can even think about a kiss, you need to check if your potential partner's urine smells compatible with yours, consult a priest about whether your combined body odors indicate divine approval of your union, and prepare a special potion made from crushed insects and fermented animal parts to enhance your romantic compatibility. Welcome to medieval intimacy, where expressing love wasn't just about emotion or physical attraction. It was a complex system of medical procedures, religious rituals, and superstitious practices so bizarre that they would make modern dating apps seem refreshingly simple and logical. Today we're diving into the 5 most absolutely mind-bending intimate habits of the Middle Ages. Practices so strange, so scientifically backwards, and so utterly insane that they'll make you grateful you weren't born in an era where romance required a degree in medieval alchemy and a strong stomach for bodily functions. Prepare to discover why medieval people believed that sexual compatibility could be determined by mixing bodily fluids in specific ratios, why they thought that certain smells were irresistible aphrodisiacs that would make modern perfume seem amateur, and why they developed intimate practices that sound like they were designed by aliens who had only heard vague descriptions of human sexuality. Because after this story, you'll understand that our ancestors didn't just have different ideas about love and sex. They had created an entire parallel universe of romantic logic that operated according to principles that would make a science fiction writer say, "That's too weird to be believable." Let's start with something that will immediately make you question the sanity of medieval medical science: the practice of urine compatibility testing, a systematic method of determining romantic suitability by analyzing, comparing, and even mixing the urine of potential partners to predict the success of their relationship. Bizarre habit. 1. Urine-based relationship compatibility testing. Medieval physicians had developed an elaborate pseudoscience around using urine analysis to determine whether two people were romantically and sexually compatible. This wasn't just a quick sniff test. It was a complex procedure that involved multiple stages of examination, comparison, and even consumption that would make a modern laboratory technician faint from horror. The process began with what they called individual essence evaluation. Each potential partner had to provide urine samples that were examined for color, clarity, smell, taste, and what medieval doctors called vital heat, determined by how quickly the urine cooled after being expelled from the body. But here's where it gets absolutely insane. The next stage involved mixing the 2 urine samples in specific ratios and observing how they reacted to each other. If the mixed urine remained clear, this indicated harmonious humors and predicted a successful relationship. If it became cloudy or separated, this suggested incompatible essences that would lead to marital discord and sexual dysfunction. Records from the University of Salerno, the premier medical school of medieval Europe, contain detailed treatises on urine compatibility testing. The Manual de Urinis Amorosis specified that compatible couples' mixed urine should maintain a golden clarity and emit a sweet herbal fragrance, while incompatible couples' urine would become murky as pond water and smell like rotting vegetation. But the most disturbing aspect was the consumption test. Medical authorities required that both potential partners drink small amounts of each other's urine to determine if their bodies would accept the partner's essence. If either person vomited or became ill, this was considered definitive proof that they were incompatible and should not marry. Court records from the Holy Roman Empire document cases where arranged marriages were cancelled based solely on failed urine compatibility tests. In 1434, the betrothal between a Bavarian count and a French duchess was dissolved when her urine reportedly turned his golden like lead when mixed, which astrologer physicians interpreted as evidence that their union would bring political disaster. The practice was so institutionalized that wealthy families employed specialized urine readers who maintained detailed charts comparing different urine characteristics with personality traits, sexual preferences, and fertility predictions. These professionals could supposedly determine not just compatibility, but also predict the gender of future children, the couple's lifespan, and even their likelihood of remaining faithful to each other. Bizarre habit. Number 2. Strategic body odor. Cultivation as courtship ritual. While modern people go to great lengths to eliminate body odor, medieval Europeans had developed elaborate systems for cultivating specific body odors that they believed would make them irresistibly attractive to potential partners. This wasn't about masking natural scents. It was about creating artificial body odors so intense and specific that they would function as chemical love potions. Medieval scent cultivation began with deliberate dietary modifications designed to alter body chemistry and create attractive odors. Men who wanted to court women ate exclusively garlic, onions, and fermented fish for weeks to develop what they called masculine musk, a body odor so pungent that they believed women would find it overwhelmingly attractive. Women developed their own scent cultivation practices that were equally revolting by modern standards. The most popular method involved rubbing their skin daily with a paste made from crushed beetles, rancid animal fat, and herbs that had been fermented in their own menstrual blood. This mixture supposedly created a feminine fragrance that would drive men wild with desire. But the scent cultivation went beyond just dietary and topical methods. Medieval people believed that emotional states could alter body chemistry in ways that enhanced attractiveness. Lovers were advised to spend time in specific emotional states, anger for men, melancholy for women, because these emotions supposedly produced chemical changes that made their natural scents more appealing. Records from the French court document that courtiers would deliberately avoid washing for months while cultivating their courtship scents. They believed that soap and water would wash away the carefully developed odors that made them attractive, so they would go entire seasons without bathing while layering on additional scent-enhancing substances. The practice reached such extremes that royal courts had to establish scent protocols to prevent courtiers from becoming so malodorous that they couldn't function in social situations. The court of Philip II of France issued edicts limiting how long courtiers could go without bathing and establishing scent-free zones in certain areas of the palace. But perhaps the most bizarre aspect was scent matching, the belief that couples who developed complementary body odors were destined to be together. Partners would deliberately coordinate their scent cultivation, with men and women eating different foods and using different preparations to create body odors that would supposedly harmonize when they were in close proximity. Medieval marriage contracts sometimes included clauses about scent compatibility, and there are documented cases of marriages being annulled because the partners' cultivated body odors were deemed incompatible by court physicians who specialized in aromatic matrimonial evaluation. Bizarre habit number 3, synchronized bloodletting as foreplay. One of the most medically dangerous and psychologically disturbing intimate practices was romantic bloodletting, the belief that couples should have their blood drained simultaneously before sexual activity to balance their humors and enhance both pleasure and fertility. Medieval medical theory held that sexual desire and performance were directly related to the balance of bodily humors, and that couples with imbalanced humors would experience poor sexual compatibility. The solution was synchronized bloodletting, performed by specialized physicians who would drain specific amounts of blood from both partners immediately before they attempted intimacy. The procedure involved both partners lying on tables, while physicians opened veins in their arms, necks, or sometimes genitals, allowing measured amounts of blood to flow into calibrated containers. The amount of blood drained was calculated based on the partner's astrological signs, body weights, and the phase of the moon, with the goal of achieving humoral harmony that would optimize their sexual experience. Records from the Medical College at Montpellier describe instruments specifically designed for romantic bloodletting, including double lancets that could open veins in both partners simultaneously, and specialized collection vessels that allowed physicians to compare the color and consistency of the partner's blood to determine if they were achieving proper balance. But the practice went beyond simple blood draining. Some couples believed that mixing their drained blood and consuming it together would create a blood bond that would enhance their emotional and sexual connection. This practice, called Singuin communion, involved drinking each other's blood immediately after it was drawn, often while the bleeding was still occurring. The medical rationale was that consuming your partner's blood would allow their humoral essence to directly influence your own body chemistry, creating perfect compatibility. Physicians would supervise these blood consumption rituals, providing specific recipes for mixing the blood with wine, herbs, and sometimes other bodily fluids to enhance its supposed effects. Court records show that romantic bloodletting was particularly popular among the nobility, who could afford the expensive physicians required to perform the procedures safely. However, many couples died from blood loss, infection, or disease transmission, leading some kingdoms to regulate or ban the practice. Now, if you're finding these medieval intimate practices as disturbing as they are fascinating, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more historical revelations that will make you appreciate living in the modern era. Bizarre habit. Number 4. Astrological genital positioning. Medieval astrologers had developed incredibly detailed systems for determining the optimal positioning of couples' bodies during intimate moments based on the positions of celestial bodies. This wasn't just about timing. It was about precise physical alignment that supposedly channeled cosmic energies directly into the participants' reproductive organs. Each zodiac sign was associated with specific body parts and sexual positions. Couples born under fire signs, Aries, Leo, Sagittarius, were required to maintain positions that kept their heads elevated above their bodies to channel solar energy downward. Earth signs, Taurus, Virgo, Capricorn, needed to maintain maximum contact with the ground, often requiring couples to have intimate relations directly on the floor rather than in beds. Air signs, Gemini, Libra, Aquarius, required positions that maximized breathing and air circulation, leading to sexual practices that took place in elevated locations like towers or balconies. Water signs, Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces, were supposed to have intimate relations near or in actual bodies of water, leading to elaborate bathing rituals that combined sexuality with aquatic environments. But the complexity went far beyond zodiac signs. Astrologers created detailed charts showing how the positions of planets affected the optimal angles for penetration, the direction couples should face during intimacy, and even the specific body parts that should be in contact based on planetary alignments. The most elaborate astrological positioning involved what they called cosmic intercourse, sexual positions designed to align the couple's bodies with specific constellations visible in the night sky. Couples would use star charts and special positioning devices to ensure that their bodies formed geometric patterns that mirrored celestial configurations. Records from the court astrologer of Emperor Frederick II describe sessions where couples spent hours arranging their bodies according to astrological calculations, using measuring devices and angle guides to achieve precise positioning. Some couples employed positioning assistants, servants trained in astrological principles, who would help arrange their bodies according to cosmic requirements. The practice was considered so important that some marriage contracts included clauses requiring that couples follow astrological positioning guidelines throughout their marriage. Failure to comply with these cosmic sexual requirements was sometimes cited as grounds for annulment. Bizarre habit. Number 5. Pregnancy prevention through magical contraception. Medieval contraceptive methods went far beyond herbal remedies or physical barriers. They had developed elaborate magical and superstitious practices that they believed could prevent pregnancy through supernatural intervention, creating contraceptive rituals that sound like they were designed by witches who had never heard of human biology. One of the most common methods was lunar contraception, the belief that having sex while holding specific objects during certain moon phases would prevent conception. Women would wear amulets made from the bones of animals that had died during eclipses, believing that this would make their wombs as dark as the covered moon and prevent fertilization. Herbal transmutation involved women consuming potions made from plants that supposedly transformed their reproductive systems temporarily. These potions contained ingredients like wolfsbane, mercury, and ground precious stones, and were believed to make women temporarily infertile by transmuting their feminine essence into masculine energy. But perhaps the most bizarre method was sympathetic contraception, the belief that performing specific actions on objects that represented reproduction would magically affect the woman's fertility. This included practices like burying eggs under full moons, burning images of pregnant women, and wearing clothes that had been blessed by sterile women. Some couples practiced displacement rituals where they would have sex while focusing intensely on images of barren landscapes, believing that visualizing infertility during the act would make pregnancy impossible. These rituals often involved elaborate preparations including fasting, meditation, and the arrangement of objects representing sterility around the bed. The most extreme form involved contractual contraception, formal agreements with supernatural forces that supposedly guaranteed pregnancy prevention in exchange for specific sacrifices or commitments. These contracts were written in special inks, signed during particular astronomical events, and often required ongoing ritual obligations. And if you're amazed by the creative but completely ineffective approaches medieval people took to contraception, definitely subscribe for more insights into historical practices that remind us how far medical science has advanced. But here, we arrive at the most important realization about all these bizarre intimate habits. They weren't just random weird customs developed by ignorant people. They represented desperate attempts to gain control over aspects of human sexuality and reproduction that seemed completely unpredictable and mysterious. Medieval people lived in a world where pregnancy, disease, and sexual compatibility seemed to follow no understandable patterns. They couldn't comprehend the actual biological and psychological mechanisms behind sexual attraction, conception, and relationship compatibility. So they created elaborate systems of magical thinking that gave them the illusion of control and understanding. These intimate practices weren't really about sex or romance. They were about the fundamental human need to believe that we can influence outcomes that are actually beyond our control. By creating complex rituals around sexuality, medieval people convinced themselves that they could predict, control, and optimize their most important relationships and reproductive outcomes. The tragedy is that many of these practices were not just ineffective, but actively harmful. Urine consumption caused illness, extreme scent cultivation led to infections, synchronized bloodletting caused deaths, astrological positioning created sexual dysfunction, and magical contraception resulted in unwanted pregnancies that people weren't prepared for. But perhaps the most tragic aspect is that these elaborate systems of sexual superstition actually made intimacy more difficult, more stressful, and more dangerous. Instead of allowing natural sexual expression and emotional connection, these practices created anxiety, medical complications, and relationship problems that probably prevented many couples from developing genuine intimacy and satisfaction. Modern psychological research shows that sexual satisfaction is primarily dependent on emotional connection, communication, and the absence of performance anxiety, exactly the opposite of what these medieval practices created. By making sex into a complex technical procedure requiring specialized knowledge and equipment, medieval people almost guaranteed that their intimate relationships would be unfulfilling and problematic. So there you have it, 5 of the most bizarre intimate habits of the Middle Ages that transformed human sexuality into a complex pseudoscientific procedure that was more likely to cause problems than solve them. From urine compatibility testing to astrological positioning, from strategic body odor cultivation to synchronized bloodletting, our ancestors had found ways to make the most natural human activity into an elaborate and dangerous ritual. These practices remind us that humans have always struggled with the mystery and unpredictability of sexuality, love, and reproduction. When we don't understand the real mechanisms behind these experiences, we create elaborate explanations and rituals that give us the illusion of control, even when they actually make things worse. The next time you think modern dating is complicated, remember that our ancestors needed physicians, astrologers, and specialized equipment just to determine if they were compatible with potential partners. They turned simple human attraction into a medical procedure that required professional consultation and often resulted in illness or death. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to appreciate the fact that modern romance doesn't require urine testing, deliberate body odor cultivation, or bloodletting before intimacy. I'm going to value the miracle of living in an era where sexual compatibility can be determined through actual communication and experience rather than through elaborate superstitious rituals. Because after exploring these bizarre medieval intimate habits, I think we can all be deeply grateful that expressing love and attraction no longer requires consulting astrologers, mixing bodily fluids, or risking death through medical procedures that were more dangerous than the problems they claim to solve. And if you made it to the end of this exploration of history's most bizarre intimate practices, tell us in the comments what country you're watching from. We're fascinated to know that these revelations about medieval sexuality are reaching people around the world who can appreciate how far we've come in understanding human intimacy and relationships.